Because the average student in a history class nowadays does not pay attention in class, more like they're sitting in class with their cell phone out and they're texting their girlfriend or their boyfriend, or they're playing video games, role playing games specifically, or perhaps they're just watching YouTube videos or watching TikTok. Bottom line is, because the average person doesn't pay attention in history class anymore, things like tulip mania completely fly over their head if someone mentions it. Nobody who's younger, Generation Z, they haven't heard of tulip mania. And when they do hear about it, they don't know what you're talking about. Tulip mania was a period during the Dutch Golden Age when contract prices for some bulbs of the recently introduced and fashionable tulip reached extraordinarily high levels. And this happened with the major acceleration starting in 1634 and then dramatically collapsing in February 1637. So here you have a period of about 3 years that this tulip mania happened over. It is generally considered to have been one of the first recorded speculative bubble or asset bubbles in history. In many ways, the tulip mania was more of a then unknown socio-economic phenomenon that a significant economic crisis. So it was the reason what they're saying basically is this was something that was localized. Like there was a culture that hyped it up, just like we see all the time when you've got people who rush out and buy something because TikTok or Facebook or Instagram tells them to. However, because it was so localized, it didn't affect the broader global markets or whatever, or it didn't affect the global markets or the wider markets of the area at the time. So, it had no critical influence on the prosperity of the Dutch Republic, which was one of the world's leading economic and financial powers in the 17th century, with the highest per capita income in the world from about 1600 to about 1720. The term tulip mania is now often used metaphorically to refer to any large economic bubble when asset prices deviate from intrinsic values. Now, I could go on and on talking about the tulip and tulip mania, but I think you get the point. What tulip mania basically was a massive ramp up in speculation where tulips and tulip crops were purchased because tulips suddenly became an extremely popular speculative asset. Now, speculation happens all the time in the market. That's the reason why the free market's important. When you have a free market, it corrects speculation. If you have something, now let me think about it like this. Imagine if we're all in jail. And imagine if somebody in jail says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to collect toilet paper because I believe that toilet paper is extremely valuable. And if I get toilet paper, I believe people will have to come to me and barter with me. And I'm going to get as much toilet paper as I can because I can use it as a currency. Now, you may have somebody else in jail who's going to stock up on cigarettes because they know people love cigarettes. People like to smoke cigarettes. You may have somebody else who stocks up on fentanyl because he knows people like getting high and risking their lives. You may have somebody stock up on weed. The bottom line is all of those things are examples of speculative assets because people are willing to buy and stock up based on the belief that they'll be worth more in the future. Now, if you make a mistake and spend too much money on a speculative asset, what happens? The free market corrects you. Basically, what will happen is you'll be sitting around with too much of this shit in your cell and you won't be able to sell it because maybe somebody will say, you know what, I don't like weed anymore. I'm going to start smoking crack instead. So they'll go on the crack and you'll be stuck with your weed and nobody wants your weed. Or maybe crystal meth or maybe fentanyl. And somebody says, you know what, I see that you got a lot of fentanyl. But I don't really want your fentanyl because, there's always a possibility this shit might stop my heart and stop my ability to breathe. And I'll just die like Heath Ledger or like anybody who I could point to who overdosed. Like, what was her name? Princess Leia in Star Wars, Carrie Fisher, I believe. Yeah, I don't want that to happen to me. So you can keep your fentanyl. And here you are, you're stuck with all this fentanyl. Now you have to figure out a way to unload it and get rid of it. The problem is nobody wants your fentanyl or the demand is very, very low for your fentanyl. So the bottom line is it's okay to stock up on a speculative asset, but it's dangerous to spend too much of your money because you could get stuck with so much speculative asset that you're not able to unload it Or if you can unload it, you might not get for it what you wanted or what you expected. You know, this happens all the time. I remember when they had those sneaker skates called Heelys, and they had like a little skate in the fucking bottom of them, and people were skating everywhere. It looked like, I thought disco was coming back. Everybody's skating around. And sure enough, that lasted for about a year or two, and then it just disappeared all of a sudden. I remember when rollerblades first came out. They was like, oh shit, you got all the roller wheels in one line? And people started selling rollerblades. They were really, really expensive. People were wearing them any and everywhere. And then all of a sudden, it just fizzled out. That was a style. The social medias of the time hyped it up. People, stores started buying this stuff. And eventually, they got to the point where they couldn't sell it because nobody really cared anymore. The fad died off. At that point, their speculation bit them in the ass, because what they were counting on was they were counting on a high demand to meet their supply. But what ended up happening was demand started dropping and their supply stayed where it was. And now here they are, they're stuck with the speculative asset, they can't get rid of it. So that is a crash course in tulip mania. Perhaps when I have children in the future, I might have a situation where I have to tell my kids not to go out and waste their money because they feel that they've stumbled onto a way to get rich quick, and they may try to buy into something that resembles tulip mania. Because you got to understand, one thing about tulip mania is tulip mania happens over and over and over and over again. It's different types of assets, it's different types of bubbles that get built up, but it happens pretty much in every single generation. There's always something that people, for whatever reason, feel they have to stock up on because they feel that it's going to be worth a lot in the future. It always happens. It never fails, because you got to remember, the people who are selling items and commodities, they have to convince you that there's a scarcity of this item. And in order to, sell their item, they have to convince you that you need to buy their item from them and you need to pay more for it than they paid. This happens. This is basic economics. This is supply and demand. I think in the future, I'm going to look back when Bitcoin and all the rest of these shitty, stupid cryptocurrencies, when all of these things are back to $0 where they belong. I believe that I'm going to have to explain to my kids what tulip mania was. And I'll also explain to them that when I was younger, that we had this thing called cryptocurrency. And you had a lot of people who were rushing into cryptocurrency, wasting money that wasn't even theirs. The government handed them welfare checks, and they gambled those welfare checks. Like, I'm going to have to tell my kids about COVID. I'm going to have to tell my kids, believe that, kids, this is what happened. Everybody sit down. Daddy's going to tell you a story. This is what happened. So we had this president named Donald Trump. And Donald Trump was hated by liberals. He was loved by conservatives. And they basically liked him because his policies, they felt that they were working. Gas prices were relatively low, despite the fact in 2019 we were entering a recession. The simple fact was his economy was going pretty well. People who needed jobs had jobs. Of course, the liberals were saying that the only reason why he had such a good job record was because Obama before him was able to save the job market from the 2008 recession. But that's besides the point. Unfortunately, this president created such hatred for himself among liberals and various snowflakes that eventually he decided that he was going to take on China. And when he took on China, he imposed tariffs on Chinese goods because he felt that the trade imbalance was leveraged too much in their favor. But the moment that he decided to fuck with China, I automatically knew his presidency was over. And I knew that because I understood that on the global economic scale, China has more power than the United States of America. Now, most people who, American patriots, jingoists listening to the Patriot Channel, they wouldn't understand what I was talking about. But I saw it almost immediately. And I said, you know what? If he fucks with China, they're going to destroy him because his election is coming up. And they're going to figure out a way to beat him out of office. I didn't know what it was going to look like. So sure enough, kids, this thing called coronavirus popped up out of nowhere. Now, I lived in China during 2003, where they had a virus called SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome. And I was fortunate because I was leaving China when that disease first came about. And I was moving to Japan at that time. And I remember that there was a lot of global uncertainty about this new virus. People had to start wearing masks in China. They also had to start wearing them in Japan and South Korea. And I was fortunate because I was in Japan, and Japan's a very, very clean and sanitary place. Now, China was lying, apparently, to the World Health Organization. So they were telling them that the numbers of the people who were sick and the people who were dying were lower than they really were. However, the crematoriums and the hospitals in China were overflowed. Now, this was in 2003. I remember this in the back of my mind because I was in Shanghai at the time living there. Now, fast forward to Donald Trump's presidency. He decided to fuck with the Chinese, and all of a sudden this COVID thing popped up. And then the liberals in the Democrat Party figured out a way that they could use COVID against him and push him out of office. Now, before he was pushed out of office, this president started he was basically forced to say, okay, you know what? We're going to have our entire population basically stay home from work. And now that they're home from work, they're not going to have money coming in. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to do moratoriums, possibly on rent. I may have to do moratoriums on eviction because we can't very well fire these people because this disease, which is a pandemic, is making it so that these people can't work. And if they can't work, I can't blame them for that. So I'm going to have to make these people stay home. So I'm going to have to give these people money. Otherwise, they're going to fight and kill each other in the street over a bag of potato chips. So this is what I'll do. I'll start printing these welfare checks and I'll start sending them out. So sure enough, this haphazard federal government, they decided to start printing out welfare checks. And on top of that, they also started this PPP loan program. Are you listening, kids? I don't want to lose you. So with this PPP loan program, basically all you had to do was sign up and say, that you had a business and that you needed loan money in order to not have to lay people off, at which point the government would literally give you cutting checks for you without actually doing due diligence to make sure that you're not outright lying to them. And what ended up happening, long story short, kids, government started printing out billions of dollars, maybe even trillions if we ever find out the truth. And the government ended up printing out so much money that they ended up creating a lot of inflation. Now, right along the same time that this was happening, there was this new thing on the block called cryptocurrency. And I personally believe, now I can't prove this, I believe that the government used cryptocurrency as a way to help swallow the inflation because they knew. By the way, the government did take out their own stakes in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies themselves. They did. Everybody at this time, kids, was 100% certain that cryptocurrency was going to be an inflation hedge. They were 100% certain that cryptocurrency was going to give them financial freedom. Now, by the way, kids, anytime you hear somebody say anything about financial freedom, you automatically know they're trying to con you or scam you, or they're lying to you and they're trying to take your money. Usually these are words that you hear at pyramid schemes when they have meetings. Usually these are words that you hear when somebody's trying to run a Ponzi scheme on you. So always be on the lookout for those words. When you hear somebody say financial freedom, you know they're fucking lying. Automatically, kids. Now listen to Daddy. I'm telling you. Daddy's telling you. If you hear anybody say anything about financial freedom, they're lying to you. Because you'll never be financially free as long as you live within these United States. You're always going to be the government's bitch. You're always going to be paying taxes. Your asshole itself is a cash register for this government. So just keep that in mind. You'll never be financially free until you're dead. Understand that. So anyway, guys, I personally believe, kids, that the government was using cryptocurrency as a way to swallow inflation. Now, why would they need to do that? Well, up until that time, the government was allowing the trade deficit to remove inflation from the country by trading useless US dollars for manufactured goods from China. So what did that look like? Well, back when I was a kid, I was able, well, not really a kid, but back when I was in my 30s, my early 40s, I was able to buy gigantic televisions for very low prices. When I was younger, a 50-inch television might be close to $1,000, maybe $2,000. By the time the Chinese took it over, a 50-inch television was only about $250, and you could get a 70-inch television for only $599. Believe it or not, I have the old pictures from Walmart to prove it. So we used to outsource our inflation by buying cell phones, iPhones, Galaxy phones, parts for our cars, kitchen supplies, digital scales, cabinets, everything you could think of in my house, kids, was made in China. And we were outsourcing inflation by sending them our US dollars for manufactured goods. Would you believe that, kids? That's what happened. I believe the government tried to use these cryptocurrencies by hyping them up on MSNBC, Fox News, and CNN, and having a bunch of gurus, people who claim that they knew everything about the crypto market. They used to come on TV, kids, and they used to say, I know that Bitcoin's going to be 100,000 by summer 2020. I know that Bitcoin's going to be $100,000 by summer 2021, and we are going to the moon. We're going to spend our money on safe moon and safe Mars so that we can finance a safe trip to Mars and a safe trip to the moon. Kids, all you got to do is invest in this cryptocurrency, and we're all going to Mars and the moon. Now, never mind the fact that back then the kids were so stupid that they didn't understand that Mars was 9 months away and that there was no rocket that could get them there in time so that they wouldn't die on the way, because, they didn't have food and they didn't have air and they didn't have everything they needed, like food, air, water. They didn't have enough stuff to actually get there alive. And on top of that, the ship was too small to give them a safe trip to return back. So yeah, even if you could get them there, they'd die there. It would be a suicide mission. But they didn't understand any of that because they were stupid back then. A lot of the kids I knew back then were stupid. So just hang with me. I'm trying to explain this as best I can. So anyway, they invested over $1 trillion, almost $3 trillion. They invested more than $1 trillion, many millions of dollars, many billions of dollars in this stuff called cryptocurrency. It was useless. You know how I take you to the arcade and they have tokens? Well, the cryptocurrency was virtually just as useless as those tokens. What it really amounted to was a gigantic Ponzi scheme. And in that Ponzi scheme, anybody who was able to get in very early was able to convince everybody else that they should put their own money into this Ponzi scheme. And once they did put their money into this Ponzi scheme, the people who got in early were able to cash out with millions. And then the people who got in late were left holding the bag. And when I say holding the bag, they lost hundreds of thousands, hundreds of millions. In some cases, now believe this, kid. Now listen, daddy won't lie to you. There was actually a president of a country, and his name was Nayib Bukele. And this guy was so dumb, he put his entire country on the roulette table and he bought up a bunch of this cryptocurrency at $55,000. And then when the price of it started to drop, he was so dumb, he bought more. There was also this government subsidized welfare queen who had started what he called a revolution in electric cars. Now, mind you, the original electric cars actually predated the cars that we had that use gas. Now, kids, I know you guys have fusion cells in your cars. But when I was younger, we actually had to put gasoline in our cars. Electric cars actually came out before the original gas car, which was invented by Carl Benz. But because the oil companies wanted to make sure that they took the lion's share of all the money, they made sure the electric car never got anywhere. Now, this guy, his name was Elon Musk. And this guy, he decided to gamble his company. It was called, the company's name, I think it was called Tesla. He decided to gamble their money on Bitcoin. And he did it around Bitcoin being $55,000. Because everybody was so hyped up. Everybody was like, oh, yeah, Bitcoin going to the moon. We're going to Mars. Everybody thought we were going to Mars. They thought we were going to the moon. So he spent all this money on this Bitcoin. And then when the price started to drop, he, just like Nayib Bukele, bought more. Now, keep in mind, kids, this was at $50,000. What they didn't understand was that when the government stopped printing those welfare checks, and when Russia decided to curb stomp the Ukraine and the United States of America put sanctions on them, and Russia basically stopped dabbling in crypto because America was trying to figure out ways to sanction them even more and sanction them in ways they couldn't get around it using cryptocurrency. And not only that, the Chinese government decided to ban most types of cryptocurrency because they didn't want their money leaving their shores. What these people didn't understand was that at all of those things, those combination of elements, they actually caused crypto to decrease in price. Nobody could understand that. I knew it all along, kids. That's why I put my money into oil stocks. I put my money into gas companies that pay dividends. I put my money into automotive companies. I bought airlines. I bought things that actually made sense. What I didn't buy was this crypto Ponzi scheme because I knew that if you didn't get in at the very beginning, you were going to get left holding the bag. But believe me, kids, believe me, when I was younger, they were really stupid. I mean, some of them would invest in cryptos just because they had pictures of dogs on them. There were three, I think. I think one was named Shiba. I think another one was called Dodge Elon. I think another one was called Dogecoin. And let me tell you, these people were so stupid that they literally were dumping money into cryptos just because they had a picture of a dog on it. In fact, some of these people were so desperate to figure out ways to get rich quick that they would invest in any cryptocurrency for any reason. They didn't even care. Well, somewhere around June, I believe it was June 2022, all of these cryptocurrencies crashed. And the crash was so pronounced because the Federal Reserve, at the same time, the Federal Reserve decided that they were going to allow interest rates to start to rise because they realized that if interest rates stayed low, the national debt would considerably grow larger and they'd never be able to afford to make the payments to service the debt. So they ended up allowing the interest rates to start to rise. And before we even got to 1%, gas prices had also simultaneously started going up, and things got so bad that you couldn't even find baby formula for your baby. Not only that, gas was like damn near $7 a gallon in some places. It cost me, what, $30, $40, $50 more just to try to fill up for the week. Just to try to fill up for the week. So, gas price got so high, that's when I bought my first electric car. Now, I know you kids don't care about electric cars because your cars have fusion cells, so you don't really have to worry about electric cars because y'all are in the future and everything. But things got bad. Things got bad. And when it came to the crypto market quietly withered away just like those tulips. And there was a guy, his name was Michael Saylor, and he lost a lot of money. You think Nayib Bukele and Elon Musk lost a lot of money and they quietly just forgot about it. Nobody really paid much attention to it. This guy, Michael Saylor, man, they put him on the hook because he owed a lot of money because a lot of his crypto was purchased on margin. Now, what did Daddy tell you? Never buy anything on margin, ever, because you'll always regret it. So that was pretty much the story as simply as I can tell it, kiddies. But you guys are smarter than these people were. And I know you guys, I'll never have to tell you not to invest in crypto. Like, in fact, I think I have an old photo. In fact, if we look at this old photo, you can actually see, where those cryptos were. It's like on that day, what was it, June 2022? Bitcoin had dropped to 24,000 all the way from now, mind you, they kept saying it was going to 100,000. Some of them said 1,000,000. Some of them said 1,000,000,000. But it never got there. It never got there. All along, your daddy kept on saying, no, it's not. Your daddy insisted it was a Ponzi scheme. Your daddy didn't trust it. Your daddy said if MSNBC, CNN, and Fox News are all saying that this is a good thing, it must be a fucking lie. So your daddy was smart enough to stay away from it. Sure enough, now, look at your daddy. I'm retired. You look at your mom. Isn't your mom beautiful? Well, your mom is a lot younger than your dad because I got her from a foreign country and she was young when I met her. Like I was 40. How old were you when we met? Grace, how old were you? I was 40 and you were like what? 19? Oh, yeah, yeah. See, that's why your mommy's so beautiful, because she's young. Because your daddy was smart. He made great investments. He made investments in real estate. Because, by the way, you notice all of the rest of these kids, like your classmates, all of them are permanent renters. They're never going to own anything. But fortunately for you, your daddy has your name on the deed. So when your daddy is dead and mommy's gone, you've got a place to stay and you don't even have to pay rent on it because daddy was smart enough to pay off the mortgage. But what daddy didn't do, keep this in mind, kids, what daddy didn't do was waste his fucking money in a Ponzi scheme. That's what daddy didn't do. Daddy was smart. That's right. Daddy was smart. He invested in real estate. And by the way, kids, some of those stocks that pay dividends that daddy invested in, those are yours now. Your name, you're the beneficiaries. So that means those stock portfolios get passed down to you. Aren't you happy that your daddy was so smart, unlike those dumb motherfuckers who daddy grew up with? Aren't you so happy? Well, kids, I guess that's enough time for today. That's daddy's story about cryptocurrency and the great, how should I say, the great coup on the President Trump of that time. So that's pretty much the story. Now, kiddies, if you have any questions, feel free to ask daddy questions, but you're going to have to ask them a little later because right now daddy's tired. Daddy wants to go in and relax with mommy, your young mom who's pretty and sexy. But that's pretty much the story, guys. So if you have any questions, just please make sure you ask daddy after daddy and mommy finish having a little